Hi, and welcome to Untethered with Jen Liss, the podcast that's here to help you break free, be you, and unleash your inner brilliance. I'm your host, Jen, and today we are going to help you see your own hero in the mirror. Let's dive in. Hey there, friend. It's Jen. Today's guest on the podcast is such a delight. I cannot wait for you to hear this episode, especially if you could use a little bit of encouragement, because this individual is a straight up heart-centered cheerleader who is here to tell you that you are indeed enough. So if you doubt the fact that you can do something, this is the podcast episode for you. This is Ashley Meyer, and Ashley owns a company called Hero in the Mirror. And what she helps people to do is see themselves as indeed a hero that is in the mirror. She's so real and really just talks about the journey that she has been on, the journey that she sees other people on. I get really honest too. We're both those people. We had this conversation right at the end of recording this episode. We're just those people who can't tell a lie. And as soon as we tell a lie, we're like, that was a lie. So I hope you enjoy this episode between two kindred spirits who are just seeing ourselves, seeing one another on this journey, and hope that you see a bit of yourself as well in this conversation and see that you yourself are indeed a hero in the mirror. Without further ado, welcoming onto the podcast, Ashley Meyer. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, Jen. What's going on with you? How are you?
I'm so good. What a beautiful question to start out this interview, to feel like I got that gift of sharing. How are you today?
Yeah, we've been speaking a little bit offline, but I didn't get to fully, presence you and your being here, and your energy already is just immense. So thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, hopping onto this call, I just offered some breath work, and we were focused on money mindset. It was a very powerful call. So I feel like I've just got like all of this like super energy. So if you feel that energy, that's why that's coming into the space.
No doubt. I am. That's exactly what I'm saying.
I'll just issue some of that beautiful money mindset into the listeners and into you. We're just going to infuse that into this episode, even though that's not essentially what we're talking about, but in some ways it all relates.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Right.
Okay, Ashley, I invited you onto the podcast. We were having some discourse ourselves through a project that I was working on. And I was like, I just need to have you on the podcast to come and talk, because the title of your podcast and your business is Hero in the Mirror. And that's such a strong concept, the idea of somebody standing in the mirror and seeing a hero. Why is that something that you care so much about that you would craft a business and a podcast around it?
Oh my gosh. Thank you for that question. This was a title for me that truly it just came out of the woodworks, and it was the title that had been chasing me my entire life, could not avoid it. And it began as a calling for really pouring into the people in my family, people in my inner circle. And I've always had a heart for service. I'm that empathetic sort of bleeding heart person. If you tell me your story, like I'm crying with you. And I've got 45,000 ideas as to, where to go from here, what to do. I want to hold people's hearts. And I fundamentally believe that, the world is going to tell you that you're the problem, you're imperfect, you should probably filter or edit who you are, how you are presenting, in order to make money, be successful, whatever the narrative is. And I just discarded that so early on in my life because of that calling, because of that heart thing going on for me. And I saw it in others. And then it was the recognizing that this essence, this innermost being of who I am, is a hero. And she's here and she must come out. She wants to serve. It's just the most desperate thing I've ever felt, was that desire to support other people, encourage other people. And so, the long story short of building my business, building my podcast, is that it just simply had to come out. Of course, I was afraid, and, started like a lot of entrepreneurs do. And I had doubts, but it just was this inner voice. And anyone who's ever had an inner voice, I feel like knows exactly what I'm talking about. But it was an inner voice that could not be silenced. And so the hero in the mirror was born.
That's so beautiful. I talk a lot about listening to your intuitive nudges, the inner voice. And that's the work that I do, is to help connect people back to that inner voice. But it sounds like, did you always have access to that? Do you feel like yours was just always so loud? I'm curious your personal journey with that voice itself.
Yes. I can't explain why. I was raised primarily in a Christian home and sort of departed from specific ideologies and beliefs. And so I don't necessarily hold them anymore for myself. However, I always was around spiritual terms. And so I think that supported me in just the knowing that simply there's more going on beneath the surface, like in other dimensions, if you will. We have the tangible, the 3D, like the room I'm in, the room you're in, the devices we're using. But then there's like the generosity and the love and energy that we're both pouring through this screen at each other and to your listeners as well. And we struggle to quantify that, but I just have always felt it and experienced it. And that's the best way I know how to explain that. But of course, there was a learning to cultivate the voice and identify it, because of something that I now identify as the voice of judgment, which is all those voices in your head. Some people call it the itty bitty shitty committee in the coaching space. But, it's really just opinions of others that have been inserted into your mind. And so then you're like, whoa, where is this coming from? I feel like I should do this with my life. I should become a mom. I should just do whatever this voice is telling me, when, that was, just a girlfriend of mine that had said that one time and I took that on. So sometimes learning to identify the difference between your voice, your inner knowing, and, whoa, this is coming from somewhere else, someone else, that can be a challenge. Like you so brilliantly said, getting into your body can often be the gateway to the knowing, where is this voice coming from? What I mean by that is, does this thought make you feel light? Does it make you feel good? Or does it make you sort of constrict and feel unsure, uneasy, maybe an unrest or something? If something feels off like that in your body, then that is the first indicator that there's something going on with this thought. It probably does not originate with you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so you're such a gift. This is why I just dropped my pen. This is why I had to have you on the podcast. When you first started talking, you're like, it's just our hearts speaking to one another through a screen. How often do we get the gift of, well, you have it every day because this is who you are, but how often in our everyday lives do we get the gift of somebody who just says something like that? Just to have the presence of mind to just be so aware that we are two humans connecting. We just get so caught up in all of the judgments and all of the things and all of the to-dos and the have-tos and the should-dos that little judgy voice is saying to us, that to just come home to what really, really matters. I have to say that aside, because it's just, when any of us, when we start listening to our inner voice, we get so much closer to what you already are. And there's this piece of me that's like so jealous of anybody who at such a young age had what you had, to just be so connected. And at the same time, I recognize that some of us go on a very long journey to get there because it offers us some gifts along the way. But what you're saying, to get back to what you're really saying, is that voice, it really distracts us from what really matters. And it's just always talking and always saying things to us. In fact, my husband, I went out after having an amazing breathwork session that I just mentioned to make this really real time. And I went out and I said, oh my gosh, this, oh my gosh, that. I kind of went into a little negative tailspin. And he was like, you're saying a lot of really negative things after you just had a really awesome thing that you just experienced. And I was like, yes, yes. My little judgy mind is taking me out of a really happy moment and trying to pull me back down into reality. So just proof in the pudding of what you just said, when you stop to notice, like that doesn't feel so good. And he noticed it first. So it can be helpful, right, to have other people in our lives who are helping us to point these things out too.
Oh my gosh, so necessary. I love that you have him in your life. This, I don't want to be misleading anyone. And, just because I had the voice doesn't mean it was always tuned in perfectly, nor did I fully understand what it was. And so, there was a bit of growth for me too. But like you said, it's just learning to articulate it and then essentially trust it. When I'm getting so many signals, so many messages from the outside, and those are valid too, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, maybe. But how do they feel in your body? Maybe not. But it's having the audacity against all other judgments, against all other opinions, all other people, to be true to your hero in the mirror. Because I think what we lose sight of is valuing that voice. There's just so much noise that we stop valuing the voice, which comes within, and we start asking, well, who am I and how could I? And, you want to understand the how. And, we want guarantees and certainty. And those are sort of false things to stand on. If you truly trust yourself, you don't need certainty. Not really. You know who you are. You know what you came to bring this world. And so why are we seeking an external validation for something that is just so inherently true for you? And like you said so beautifully when we were discussing your show, this is just a gift. Who you are and what you have to bring into the world is a gift. My way of talking about that is being the hero in the mirror. And for me, it's that reminder that, the best of Ashley is always here. She's always present, whether she's, showing up shitty in a certain moment and the negativity is sort of winning. That's just a battle, but I'm going to win the war. You know what I mean? So it's believing in who you actually are long enough to pull off something incredible with your life and to give your gifts.
Yeah, I love everything that you said is absolute music. One of the things that you said, just if you trust yourself, you don't need certainty. And a lot of us are grasping for certainty all the time. And that certainty that we're grasping for, it's like it puts us in a box because we needed certainty so bad that then we box ourselves in and we can't even see the gift that we are inside of that box. we're just trying so hard to be in that box. Can I ask for you on your journey, where have there been any of those moments where maybe you struggle, maybe it's one of those battles that you speak of where you maybe weren't trusting yourself? Any big aha moments that you had along your journey that helped you to really understand who you are, who that hero is for you?
I think it would have been most recently in my podcasting journey because, like most people, you ask, who am I to speak? Who am I? What's my message? Who am I speaking to? And really just starting service. And I do mean starting with one person, any person, right? I had found myself coaching mostly my entire life. And so I was doing it for free, essentially. And when I decided that my voice mattered and that it was needed in this conversation, I just hit record. and I hit record again. And then I hit record again. And some of my episodes are truly unlistenable. I cannot describe to you how horrible. And in fact, I've received feedback. Hey, Ash, number 6, you might want to take that down. I'm like, oh, that's so loving. Thank you for the feedback. It stays up. Why? Because I know where I was and I was in process, and I'm also okay with being in process. So it's just releasing the certainty, if you will, in this instance, of your podcast being any good in this moment. It doesn't even need to be, because 70 episodes later, I figured it out. Wasn't pretty. And it doesn't have to be.
I love that, this idea of being okay with being in the process, and that you've kept those episodes up, because it shows you how far you've come when you look back at it for yourself. And it also shows people how far they can go, the actual steps, because sometimes you can look at somebody who has made it so far and we don't see the in between. There's so much invisible there. And for a long time, it's like we were like, Control Alt deleting the in between so that nobody could see, because, oh my gosh, I don't want anybody to see how bad it was before. And I think we're all realizing that collectively that's not supportive to delete that in between.
No. I was thinking of my college days when you said that, because a lot of researchers will, put out the latest and they'll find that their past stuff has been inaccurate. But what if you just left it up and said, this was a question that we once had and we tested it and it turns out that it was false? Right? But it takes courage to do that. It takes courage to be wrong publicly. And this is where that self-trust comes back in, because we simply don't learn and we don't grow from getting it right every time. If I was just to take a step forward and know that everything's going to work out, I wouldn't even take a step forward. What's the point? Truly, honestly. And maybe I'm just that girl, but there's a journey that your life is called for. And let me just tell you openly that there will be missteps. They're built into the journey. They're supposed to be there. So when they happen, nothing has gone wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. In fact, you're more than equipped to work it out, to figure it out. I think I spent a long time, Jen, of feeling like, my marriage had to be perfect. I've been divorced once before. And, my life just had to be perfect. I had to be this hero in the mirror all the time. And that lesser, perhaps negative version of me that was sort of in process, showing up messy on my podcast, was the part that I needed to hide or edit and all of that. And somewhere along the way, I just fell in love with me.
What's more heroic than showing your flaws, really? Like, who wants a perfect hero?
Right. I think so. That's a boring movie. Turn it off. Who's watching? Like, if the hero came up on the show and they've already got like all the muscles on muscles, and they're taking names, and they're like, the bad person has already been defeated. What are we here for? Why did I just pay for this ticket?
Maybe that's why I don't really love Superman. Superman's kind of like that perfect, like, he's just like, he looks perfect. Everything just feels so perfect. Like, Iron Man is my favorite. Who's your favorite if you like have to pick a superhero? Like, do you have one that you like other than yourself, of course?
Okay, goes without saying, but the question is unfair. Oh, I feel the same way. If you were to ask me my favorite song, I would also struggle. But Iron Man is up there. I think this is harder than I thought. I've never been asked this.
What's one that you like? I know sometimes when you say favorite, that puts it's so much pressure. Why so much pressure?
Why so much pressure? Well, of course, Wonder Woman comes up. And the movie that came out, I think it was 5 years ago, that version was phenomenal. I wouldn't say she's my favorite, though. I'm super into Guardians of the Galaxy. If that tells you anything about me.
Yeah.
The comedy. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. What character do you really love in Guardians of the Galaxy?
Oh, Rocket. All day.
Yeah.
the raccoon guy who's like sort of been altered and engineered, and he's very eccentric and, you know, sort of can't be contained. He's really passionate, but rough around the edges. You know what I mean? But he's just a loving soul. And you're like, oh, Rocket, I just want to cuddle you and like we could go on adventures and save the galaxy together, dude.
When you probably just described yourself.
Did I? Okay.
I don't know you that well, but it feels like there might be some parallels.
I'm not going to deny that. I won't deny that at all.
So fun. Thank you for going on that segue with me.
Absolutely. Well, to bring it back to me even more, music plays a big role in that movie. And my mom was a music teacher. So growing up, I just remember falling asleep to her practicing the piano. And something about it to this day soothes me. I can't explain it. I don't know if you do sound healing at all.
Yeah, I don't offer necessarily sound healing. I maybe eventually, because I love it when it is paired together, the sound healing with the breath work. I will play, music that I don't create that is sound healing music for the chakras and things. However, not necessarily, but yeah, I mean, music, there's so many studies that show that it actually is healing. That's really beautiful that you bring that up, that's part of it for you. So for the listener, you might think about, what is my favorite superhero and what might that reflect maybe about yourself in terms of, all things, some of those flaws that are really beautiful about yourself. Like, are you super eccentric and are you rough around the edges? Whatever those things might be. It's just kind of a fun little reflection activity for yourself.
Absolutely. I love that. And I also echo that, anyone listening should try that on for size and see if, you could find yourself in a superhero. It's so good.
I love that idea. Yeah. You are the superhero and also find little pieces of yourself, because outward we can reflect on some of the things that we see in our outward world to see on the inside. Okay. I'm curious because you are a coach, you coach people. You are so obviously a coach. You share from the heart so easily, even just in normal everyday conversation. What do you see mostly that people are struggling with, and how do you help them move forward with that in your own coaching practice? What is one of the biggest things?
Outsourcing the solution. It's the biggest impediment to progress that I see, because if someone else is the problem, then you're too distracted complaining about that, and you'll never step up and recognize that it's you. It's been you all along. In fact, no one else holds a candle to what you bring and what you were meant to bring, right? So I do right now, I'm providing business coaching. And so I'll go on site and work primarily with teams, look at what their culture is, what it isn't, where they're able to work effectively together. And so what's interesting in a team dynamic is that you see this very quickly. Oh, the problem is with Sean or so-and-so, who's not anyone who's not me. They're the problem. And when they come to meetings, nothing gets done, right? So I think that for me in my coaching, it's learning to identify where are you outsourcing and not taking personal responsibility. That is my number one pillar. Ownership, personal responsibility, whatever you want to call it. Just because the minute you give that away, you've also given away your power and your capacity to make a change.
Is there just even just one little thing that you can help somebody to recognize that maybe they are outsourcing their power, maybe they aren't taking responsibility? What is a signal for that?
If you're not actively making a change, approaching something differently. For me, I use journaling. I have a stack of 8 journals right here, and I filled every single page. If I am simply applying an old solution, an old way of, let's say talking to my teammate, but I just keep getting the same result and we're spinning our wheels and we could never really see eye to eye on something. So basically, I'm saying if you're frustrated, that's your number one indicator.
Okay, and
this is not working. Yeah. You could do anything else. Literally anything. Try something else. Try something crazy. Or you could do like what Tim Ferriss says and do the opposite. If you want a specific answer, whatever you're doing, just do the opposite. He gives this sales talk on his podcast where he's talking about he was making all of his calls 9 to 5. It wasn't working. He was coming in at like the low numbers. Okay, well, what would the opposite be of making my calls between 9 to 5? I'm going to call people before 9 and after 5. And you know what he did? He broke sales records. Wow. Just because he thought, and he asked himself this question, which he shares on his podcast: what if I did the opposite? So I would encourage you, my clients, the listeners, to ask yourself that same thing. What is the opposite of whatever it is that's frustrating me? And then try that. And not be attached to whatever happens. Because, when we throw noodles at the wall, we don't necessarily expect them to stick right away. And so just because, it didn't quite work the first go, that's all right.
Yeah. And you're not blaming the noodle.
No, you're not blaming the noodle. That you needed to try that noodle. Otherwise, you weren't sure if it was your noodle or not.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. We're going to take this noodle metaphor really far. How much further can we take it?
Can you tell that I might be hungry?
That's amazing. Okay. I'm pondering this for a second with Tim Ferriss and what he did. What do you think worked there? What do you think worked? Was it that it's because it was better for him and he was more on the spot in those other hours? Or was it because that's when other people were more responsive? He was doing something different than everybody else was doing. And this is kind of a little bit off topic, but I'm also just curious to think about this. And if he has shared, what was it about that ended up working?
Right. We'll do the thought experiment. From what I know about this particular question, he found that he simply had more access to people because, 9 to 5, you're booked out. Like that's your business day. And so when do I have time to talk to salespeople? And then here's a story that we're all telling ourselves. Salespeople just want to sell me. Well, yeah, they do. But perhaps they're selling you because they care about you and they're trying to serve you. That was another big thing that I had to sort of wrap my head around. Just sales is service. And I bought into the lie for so long that when you're selling someone, you're trying to swindle, you're trying to be greedy, or whatever the story, the version is that you got, that's the one I got. And I just kept running up against that one. I was getting frustrated with it. I wanted to serve people. So then, I recognized, oh, dang it, I have to sell them. I have to sell them. I get to sell them. Okay. So I really had to sort of inquire about this story that it turns out did not come from me, but it came from my family of origin and society at large. I would venture to say that society at large sort of tells us that sales are bad. And we should look out for people who are selling us because, they're probably trying for some personal gain and like yada, yada, yada. I don't want to give lip service anymore to all of that because I don't hold it to be true. I really find that every purchase I've ever made, oh my gosh, I was in such gratitude for the person, the service, whatever, willing to offer me that thing that I was looking for. And so, in your coaching and whatever it is that you bring into the world, selling is such a service.
Truly it is. And there are a lot of people listening to this podcast. We're all selling all the time, by the way, but there are entrepreneurs. And when you become an entrepreneur, whether you're a coach or you're selling a product or whatever it is that you're selling, if you have the story in your head, which almost all of us do, as you mentioned, we have this sales story that exists. You're going to come to a point of rub with it. And that was early in January for me this year. I have been entrepreneurial for a long time, but I moved back into the corporate world and now I'm building a business again. This happened very much for me in January. And so it has been a lot of unraveling of these stories and my own stickiness with it. And you're so right about it being a service. And when you can really fully embody that and release some of those other stories that we have attached to what it means to be salesy and actually seeing in the world other people who are selling to you as offering you something and not coming at you. It's like when we shift that perspective within ourselves is really when you can start to sell in the world yourself. I know we've kind of like ventured off of Tim Ferriss's, but actually it really is kind of the same point. And what worked for him was shifting that perspective too, of not just trying to be like, well, it's between 9 to 5. That's when I got to sell them. It's like, if you can just do the opposite, it can hopefully like shift yourself even out of that perspective too.
I love the way you articulate that. Totally. I'd say I had that sort of rub. Oh, more recently than January. I mean, honestly, let's say all summer long, but it's just returning to service for me, just returning to service. And whenever I get into my head and I start to feel pressure about, I should be selling this, or I should be, hitting whatever my metric is for this month, I'm not making it about service in those moments. I'm making it about numbers, right? So I think that if I focus on service, whenever my brain ventures off into, something else or some other story, just returning to the next person you're going to help. Who is that? And then have the courage to sell them.
Yeah. And we can always return back to that. Thank you for your honesty about that. You know what? This is something I appreciate about you, and what I have heard on your podcast as well, is that you're so honest about that. Like, we all trip at some point, and you get to get back on the wagon. You get to look back in the mirror and see that hero who is here to be of service to other people and of service to yourself. Because if you have a business, selling is a service to yourself as well. You're being of service to you. You're being of service to the other person. You have a gift to offer, and that offering that gift is actually a gift to yourself too, right? It feels so good to offer.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Way better to offer the gift, and fully just dive into your life project, whatever it is, whether you're an author, speaker, podcaster, you sell a physical product, doesn't matter. If that's your calling, that's what you're meant to be doing. But it's so much better than a 9 to 5. Punching in, punching out, building someone else's dream. I stopped being interested in that very early on.
I myself have ventured into both. I see the benefit of both. I myself am simply just entrepreneurial at my core. I was not as happy in a corporate environment. I do see how some people, it's just like, I just want to do my job and go home, and that the rest does not matter to me. But some of us are just called and we are just called to do it on our own, which is not always the easiest journey.
No, but I think if you've been called, then you know it.
Yeah, it's that voice.
Right. And it sounds like your listenership is that person being called. So, totally makes sense where we're coming from there. But, to your point, it's not necessary that all of us be called and have this entrepreneurial spirit. The world doesn't need that.
There's a place.
People have other callings. Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything that we have not touched on that you're like, I just feel like this is something that today, for some reason, it's on my heart and I need to share this, if anything?
What's on my heart is just that each and every one of your listeners has a valid mission, and they have, if you want to call it a calling, call it that. But they have this hero in the mirror identity, maybe by another name. So I just want to be a voice of encouragement and perhaps a cheerleader for anyone listening who has self-doubt, wonders, is this enough? Am I enough? The answer is a resounding yes, all day, every day. When you're in the thick of despair and when you're questioning, it is still true. You still have that gift that the world desperately needs. Just because you wonder whether it is needed or not doesn't invalidate it. And so you're needed.
Thank you so much for sharing that message. That's something that all of us, I just want to cut that little bit out of this podcast, and everybody listen to Ashley every morning.
Oh, that's so kind. I should play back to myself, because it's staying in the energy of service. It truly is. And, I don't find myself venturing outside of that energy too often. Like you alluded to, it is one that is natural to me, but I don't know if it's like a thirst that will not be satiated or what's going on, but it's just, I think if you have the desire to serve, then you can't do it enough.
Yeah, same. I feel that same calling, and it's like I keep trying to go outside of it for some reason, and it just keeps calling me back. It's like, just give up the fight. Okay. There's one question that I love to ask every single guest on this podcast. Where do you see the magic in the world?
Oh my gosh. I see it in random moments. I see it in strangers meeting or holding doors for each other, or for some reason, old people who, make the long trek out to their driveway to get the mail or whatever. And just the mundane, the average moments that would otherwise be looked over, as unconsequential. But there's something there. And I think that it has to do with the rhythm of life. And, we each on this journey sort of find our own rhythm, find what works for us, what is true for us. And so I'm definitely a people watcher by nature, but I just love to see people plugged into their own magic, living their day in whatever way is meaningful to them.
That is just such a magical answer. Thank you for that. And the visual of just an elderly person just going out to get their mail, the essence of that, like that it's like we overlook those moments, and yet it's just as precious as any other moment that exists within our day too. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. What a beautiful interview and just time spent with you. I know that the listeners got so much out of this. Ashley, where can people connect with you?
I hang out at herointhemirror.com. My website is under construction, but I spend my time with people, just talking to people. So you could find me there. Check out what I'm doing. There's a link to my podcast, The Hero in the Mirror. It was such an honor to come on, Jen. You're wonderful.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'll put all of the links in the show notes if you want to connect with Ashley. Thank you again so much for coming on.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Ashley. I very rarely anymore actually sit down and write takeaways as I'm listening to somebody speaking, but there were so many little nuggets that I have to share some key takeaways with you from this episode. Start with one person. Start with one person. Your voice is so dang needed in this world. Next, be okay with being in the process. Things are not always happening perfectly. And in fact, those things that are happening imperfectly might be some of the most important steps on your journey. So have the courage to be wrong. Next, take personal responsibility. Take ownership of where you are at. If you find yourself looking around and blaming another person, turn around and look at, where can I be shifting? Where can I potentially try to experiment and do the opposite? Next, don't be attached to the outcome. Allow yourself to enjoy the process. And finally, for those entrepreneurs out there, and really for every human being, you're selling every day, and sales is service. When you find yourself fearing sales, being salesy, remind yourself of the human beings who you were there to support, and that you indeed have a gift to offer the world. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. It means the world to me and to Ashley that you would take the time to listen to this and to really reflect on what it means for you on your own heroic journey. If you enjoyed this episode and you know somebody that could benefit from it, share it with a friend. You can also just take a screenshot of the episode, share it on social media, tag me, tag Ashley. Our Instagram handles are right there in the show notes, and you can share it with all your friends very easily with a couple of clicks. It would mean the world to us if you did so. You just keep shining your magical unicorn light out there for all to see. I'll see you next time.